Daniel, you can change your name to, are you able to change your name?
Oh, yeah, there's going to be a lot of me on the screen in a couple of minutes.
I will try. It didn't really ask, so let me see if I can fix that.
I think I can do it for you if you can't. Let me see. No, I can't.
Okay, yes, I can.
All these folks to panelists. So Christine, Dawn.
Yeah, there's Amy. Federation should be Amy.
Okay. All right, and Danielle is sending invites out to everyone, but I think I will also go ahead and tell folks, remind folks that they can join on the public link.
Okay. Hi, Amy, welcome. Hello, Dawn.
Hi, thank you. The issue was that in the past, Danielle has already sent, I don't know, it's Danielle or Alexis always sent out a panelist link the day of or the day before. So I relied on that. Anyway, it's all good.
Okay, and we're just responding to a couple of other messages about this. So here's Joanne.
Hi there.
Did I accidentally share my screen?
No, no one is sharing screen right now, Barry.
Okay, I think I just reset my, here we go.
So thanks everyone for joining. Just give us a couple more minutes. We had a tech difficulty, and so we're getting a few more of our working group members on the call before we get started. Thanks for your patience.
Okay, Diana Lopez is in the waiting room, and Linda has just messaged me.
Hi, Diana. Welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Linda will be joining us in just a second. And Alexis, did you say that Danielle is sending a new link to the rest of the working group right now?
Yes, she is sending out the links to everyone, and I am also fielding some emails. So I'm going to encourage everyone to just join the public link and we'll promote them. But yeah, just give us another couple minutes.
And I see John Previtali is also here in the attendees area. And I may, we'll see how many we have on the steering and the working group that are here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. We will probably get rolling once we get one more member present, just in the interest of time. Linda is now in the attendees area. So when she joins, we'll get started. And if we just monitor our arrivals as they come in. For folks who are joining us, we had a technical difficulty with our Zoom panelist links today. Omar is also
Hi there. Hi, John and Linda. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Allie. How are you?
Why don't we go ahead and get started? Just looking and seeing where Linda is. She was just here a second ago.
Here.
Okay. Oh, there you are. Okay, great, great. So I'm going to do roll call. Apologies for the technical glitch we've been having with our Zoom login today, or lack of a Zoom login today. We'll start with roll call, and there are a few folks who I know may join us in progress. So Omar just messaged and said he will be joining us a little bit late. Don Dickinson, I see you there. Paul Fordham, I don't see Paul. Linda Jackson.
Here.
Lorenzo Jones, I don't see Lorenzo. Cesar is excused. He had a conflict today. Amy Lykover,
Sure.
Great, welcome. Tom Monahan, I don't see Tom on the screen at this point. Diana Lopez.
Here.
Welcome. Rena Lopez is joining us, but hasn't gotten on yet. John Previtali.
Here.
And Daniel Ryan.
Here.
And Joanne Webster.
Hello, here.
Great. Nice to see everybody. We do have a quorum, so we're going to move into our agenda, and hopefully we'll be joined by some of the other members as we move along. Just to go through the acceptance of the prior meeting summary, were there any comments or changes to the summary from the last meeting? Can we have, yes, go ahead, Amy. You're muted right now.
Sorry. I think there's a typo on bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4 on page 2. Shouldn't it be off site, or is it off SIE?
I'm sure it's site. Yeah, thank you for that. We'll fix that. Would you like to move approval with that correction?
Just double check. Yes, I move approval.
I'll second.
Thanks. All in favor, just raise your hands. Okay, thanks very much. So our summary is approved. Is there anyone in the attendees area who would like to speak? I don't know that we have any attendees at this point. Nobody, Alexis?
I do not see any attendees at this point.
Okay, we will hopefully gather some attendees. I think the attendees link was working because some of you logged in using it. So hopefully we'll have some others joining us during the meeting. We're going to move into the discussion items, and I just wanted to let folks know our format's going to be a little bit different today than it usually is. We're hoping to have more of a discussion. We have a few guests with us today who Allie will be introducing in just a minute. I have a really short presentation just to lead us off, and what we're going to do is at the end of the presentation, Allie will have some remarks, then Alex will be guiding us through the first part of the meeting, and then Ricardo will be guiding us through the latter part of the meeting. And then we have our general business items at the end of the meeting. And you'll be introduced to both Alex and Ricardo momentarily. Also want to acknowledge a couple other folks. Christine, nice to see you and welcome. And Liz Darby will also be introduced by Ali in just a couple of minutes. But what I'm going to do now is share my screen. By the way, I see Rena is coming into the meeting now. Okay, and can everyone see that? Great, thank you. So we're focusing today's meeting on the topic of affirmatively furthering fair housing. Just to provide some context as to where we are, we've had 5 meetings up to this point, corresponding roughly to these topic areas, which are the chapters of the housing element. We're now moving into a discussion of fair housing. We'll be coming back at a later meeting, which we'll talk about at the end, on policies and programs, and then moving on to HCD review and further public input as we go into the revision and adoption stages. So I'm just going to leave this on the screen for a moment. This is the definition of affirmatively furthering fair housing that was provided by the State Department of Housing and Community Development that essentially expresses what this term that we've been talking so much about means. We use the acronym AFFH for short. Gets a little awkward when you're using it as a verb, but it's easier than saying affirmatively furthering fair housing over and over. So have a quick look at this, and then we're going to move on to what this means in the context of the housing element.
May I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So will there be an opportunity, I didn't see it on the agenda, to just respond or discuss the maps?
Yes, we will have an opportunity to do that.
Very interesting.
Later on. Yeah. Great. So the AFFH mandate is more than just a section of the housing element, a new chapter or a new technical appendix that we need to add. It's really a fundamental reshaping of what a housing element is and how a housing element is, what the intent is of the housing element. So there are both specific requirements for maps and data, as well as more global, higher level requirements that show how the programs and policies in our element are contributing to the goal and priority of affirmatively furthering fair housing. It also has implications for the way we do outreach, both through this process and through our broader process over the 8-year planning period. And then lastly, the distribution of our housing sites has to support fair housing goals. So I have 4 slides before I close this, and each one corresponds to those four topics that I just put up on the screen. So with respect to the specific map data and analysis requirements, the state published guidelines about a year ago for what it expects cities to include in their housing elements that specifically demonstrate or analyze the AFFH metrics. And this includes looking at fair housing case rates and outreach and what the city's capacity is to do fair housing enforcement and education, looking at patterns of integration and segregation in the community, again, using that mapped data, identifying racially or ethnically concentrated areas of poverty and or affluence. And I should say these are technical terms, and there are specific metrics that the state or federal government uses to define what these areas are, and then it's generally census data is used to determine where they are, and they can be mapped and measured. Evaluating disparities in access to opportunity. This includes education, economic opportunity, and environmental conditions. And then identifying disproportionate housing needs, including the risk of displacement. And that covers things like overcrowding or the percentage of residents who are spending more than 30% of their incomes on housing costs. And again, that can be mapped and looked at spatially. So what we're doing when we're looking at this data is noting patterns that both between the city of San Rafael and the region, both Marin County and the broader Bay Area, and then also looking at patterns within the city and its neighborhoods. And it's not just about data. I think the map book was our first step, but there is additional work to do, applying local knowledge to the data and combining some of that data with the lived experiences of residents and what we're hearing from the community organizations that work with our residents who are experiencing some of the issues we're talking about. Next, we're looking at all of our housing policies and programs through the lens of AFFH. We have to evaluate what are called contributing factors. And when we're talking about that, these are some of the same issues that I pointed out on the last slide. What are the factors that are creating some of the issues, fair housing issues that we're experiencing in the community? Is it a lack of enforcement? Is it existing patterns of segregation? Is it concentrated poverty? Is it issues related to persons with disabilities? And so on. And then looking at that locally, which of the factors are most evident here? How should they be prioritized? And how do our goals, policies, and programs respond to those contributing factors? So think of it as a lens for the entire housing element, looking at each of our policies and programs and the extent to which it furthers fair housing. I mentioned the AFFH link to our outreach program. Basically, it's a mandate that our outreach connects to all economic segments of the community, that we use a variety of methods, including some of the traditional ones that you all are used to and some newer methods. Ricardo will talk a little bit more about this later. That we translate our materials and have translation available at our meetings. Again, I'm not going to go through each of these bullet points individually. I think the point is that outreach is an important part of what we're doing here. And again, both in the context of the housing element, but broader, as we operate as a city, what are the steps we can take to be more inclusive in our outreach on all planning processes? The sites inventory, this is where it gets a little wonky. We have to do an analysis of our sites and see to what extent they encourage integration, so that we're not concentrating all of our lower income opportunity sites in a single part of the city, and that we're creating opportunities throughout San Rafael, particularly in what are called the highest resource census tracts. These are areas that are relatively affluent, that may not have a lot of affordable housing or multifamily housing today, looking at ways we can create opportunities across the city. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to turn it over to Ali for a moment, and then we're going to get into a discussion with Alex and Ricardo. And before I do that, any just clarifying questions, not deep dive or data questions, but just about where we're going with this with our session today? Go ahead, Amy.
Well, I found it very interesting that for every map, there's a map of the region. And I know that, that we're looking at the region, but are we focusing primarily today on just the city?
I think we're focusing on the city, but it's helpful to have that regional context just as a benchmark. So today we're really talking about the city. And that's a good question. And Alex may speak more to that when we get to that next part. Okay, I'm going to ask Ali to do some introductions. Thanks.
Thanks, Barry. Good evening, everyone. So before I start introductions, I just wanted to share a couple of things about affirmatively furthering fair housing, or AFFH. I'm not sure that either one of those is easier to say, but I wanted to just say that, we're committed to doing this work. There are a couple of reasons we're doing this work. One is we're required to do so by the state. The state's mandating us to incorporate the FFH into our housing element in all of the different sections of the element. But also, the city's committed to it. We've represented, we have shown that we're committed to it through the work that we've done in the past. And we'll continue to show that we're committed to this with the work that we're doing. We'll continue to be doing in the future. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that we've done. One of the things that happened in the past year is that the city adopted a general plan that included equity and inclusion, equity, diversity, and inclusion component. And I believe that's the first of this type of an element. And I wanted to mention that because we did just receive an award from APA. So great work, Barry. And I also wanted to highlight that Ricardo also contributed to that in the outreach. So I wanted to recognize that. And then in 2019, the City Council committed to addressing the lack of available affordable housing by defining policies to change the way we operate. These include changes to our inclusionary housing obligation, which now allows payment of in lieu fees. And those in lieu fees that we've received so far have contributed to 3 new affordable housing projects, at least 1 rehabilitation project, and 1 project that would facilitate conversion of existing units into permanently affordable units. We've also the city's also adopted anti-displacement regulations, including the adoption of a just cause eviction ordinance that is intended to encourage really certainty in the rental market for renters. The city also adopted a relocation assistance program with that provides payment of relocation for tenants that are evicted for no fault. We know that there's a lot more work to be done. This housing element is not going to dive deep into the policy work, but it will help inform the additional policy work that we'll be doing through the more broad policies and programs that will be incorporated into the housing element. So as we continue to consider policy changes outside of this working group, we're going to kind of dive deeper, but we'll need to include the appropriate people that are relevant into the conversation. So as you provide input tonight and into the next coming sessions, we'll be able to incorporate policies and programs that will help us kind of form a deeper level of detail in the future. And in parallel as well, we'll continue to be doing deep dive policy work in parallel with this housing element. So that's it. I want to go ahead and now move into introductions. First, I wanted to introduce Ricardo Huertanino. He helped us, as I mentioned, on the general plan outreach that we did in the canal. We knew we needed to do things differently, and Ricardo spearheaded that effort by building capacity and allowing the canal community members to participate in a more informed and meaningful way. So we've invited Ricardo to help us with this. Ricardo's also been helping us with other community engagement efforts in the city. So it made sense to have Ricardo join us tonight. Also wanted to introduce Alex Schaefer. He has expertise in affirmatively furthering fair housing, and he'll be providing the context on kind of the historical background, kind of a short overview of strategies for affirmatively furthering fair housing. So that he'll be kicking off the discussion. And then lastly, I wanted to mention or introduce Liz Darby. We retained Liz to be part of the city team. Liz will be working with community development on and as needed support on the housing element and support just on the ongoing deep dive policy work that I mentioned, and work that'll help us address affirmatively furthering fair housing work and other similar work. So we felt it, the city felt it appropriate for her to be joining us in this meeting tonight. So that's it. With that, I'll go ahead and let Alex Schaefer kick off the discussion.
Wow. Well, thank you, Allie. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here. I'm from San Anselmo, California. So San Rafael is very near and dear to my heart. I'm just getting texts from my aunt, Izzy Hogan, has been a San Rafael resident for 50 years or something about that. Just sold her house, is about to sell her house to move to Rossmore. So I really hope I saw that we're actually breaking ground on some senior housing. I'm really excited about that because I wish my aunt didn't, even though she's actually moving closer to me. But it's really just an honor to be here and to be able to help you all. I'm really excited about what you're doing. And so I just want to make basically like 4 main points to help you all have a little bit more context about what we're trying to do here and how it fits with both the sort of larger historical context and all of the various rules and regulations and state laws. So the point number 1 is that I'm here as a resource. the city has brought me on to help as part of this process, not just in today's meeting, but also in the coming meeting that we're having, and at times in between throughout this process, to use my whatever expertise that I do have on affirmatively furthering fair housing or on housing policy in general. I'm a housing policy consultant. So I work with state level clients and regional clients, and anything that has to do with the transformation of housing policy or of the housing economy and how the housing industry, the real estate industry, is something that I work on. So I'm really excited to just be part of this. Staff can make my contact information available to anybody that is a member of this committee. You're welcome to reach out at any time if you want to talk in more depth about anything, because again, we're not going to be able to get too deep into the weeds. So whether it's a question about the maps or about a specific policy or what any of this means, or the historical context, again, I'm not going to go, this isn't the meeting where we'll talk about sort of why the canal became the canal or why different parts of Marin look like they do. But again, I'm always happy to have those conversations. You can also find any of my writing. I wrote a book about the resegregation of the Bay Area called The Road to Resegregation. You might have heard me on Michael Krasny at some point a few years ago. All of that stuff is available online or on Amazon. I'm also happy to send you just the chapter about Marin County. Just the trigger warning, it's not a particularly always nice chapter in the book. And so just be prepared for that. So I'm here. So that's number one. And again, I'm excited for this to be the beginning of the conversation. So number two, so let's talk a little bit about kind of the context of what's new about this. And so one of the things I think is most important to understand about what we're trying to do here is that while there are a lot of new requirements for local jurisdictions in terms of how we have to do affirmatively furthering fair housing, the push for state policy to do something about segregation and housing is very old. So Barry, I don't want to date Barry here, but Barry and I had lunch the other day, and I found out that Barry worked as an intern at ABAG in the very first regional housing needs assessment in 1980. Was that right, Barry? So RENA, which is that process that I'm thinking you're all familiar with, which allocates that, the number of housing units of different income levels that each jurisdiction is supposed to create, that was an anti-segregation measure passed by the state in the 1970s and implemented starting in the 1980s, because jurisdictions simply just weren't building enough housing, weren't permitting enough housing, especially for lower income folks. So that's, RENA is an income-based program. It didn't mention race because of the politics of the time, but it was always intended to impact segregation. And we have had simultaneously, again, fair housing laws on the books since the 1960s. And all of this is just a continuation of where we've been trying to go. And so in the city of San Rafael and in Marin County, we've had generations of attempts to do work in this space. And so it's important, I think, that we all remember that we're part of a tradition and part of a sort of history of trying to do things. And there are many things that the city has done, I think, that are really important in this. And so I would just encourage folks, one is to look back at some of the policies that were in the previous housing element. I know Barry put that an analysis together, which was shared with you I believe in the first meeting. I think it is important. Again, we're not trying, it can seem all new, but this isn't a reinvention of the wheel. It doesn't mean abandoning everything that we were doing previously. In fact, I think a good faith attempt to do this reflects critically on, hey, okay, we've done this, we've had this program. Maybe it hasn't worked because it's not big enough. Maybe it hasn't worked because it doesn't have the resources. Maybe we said we would do it and we didn't quite get it done. That's a lot of, in Marin County and housing elements, there are often a lot of really good ideas, but it doesn't quite make it to the council and doesn't quite get it through and become a real program. Or again, the jurisdictions are relatively small and we don't have the resources. So maybe the answer is pooling our resources with other jurisdictions in the county to make something happen. But again, we're not starting brand new. And again, one of the reasons why I'm excited to work with you all in San Rafael is it feels like the commitment to this is really real, and that the city of San Rafael, I think, is really excited in a lot of the organizations to take a leadership role in the county and really do some interesting things. So I'm excited, like I said, to be a resource. And again, happy to answer any of the questions about it. The thing that has changed is that RENA was set up to deal with the problem of regional segregation. So in my book, I talk a lot about the Oakland-San Leandro border, which is a very famous example of segregation. Right? East Oakland was almost exclusively African-American and through the 1960s. After a period of white flight, had made it that way. And San Leandro in 1970 was 99% white. And the police really, and real estate brokers and everybody really reinforced that line. So RHNA was an attempt to get jurisdictions to stop segregating it that way. It doesn't, so if you're looking at Marin County being segregated versus compared to the Bay Area, theoretically RHNA has been attempting to kind of get at that problem for a long time. But that doesn't necessarily, for cities large enough like San Rafael that actually have areas that have more concentrated communities of color and lower income communities and lower resource areas and higher concentrated areas, cities that are segregated within themselves, RHNA didn't really do that much. And the problem is that some jurisdictions were taking all of their affordable housing that they were meant to build and putting it only in certain communities. And so again, RHNA would attempt to build more affordable housing in general in a place like Marin County, but within San Rafael or within a place like Concord is a very similar state where you have a monument corridor, which is very similar to the canal demographically, and then the rest of Concord looks more like the rest of San Rafael. You all have very similar kind of maps. It wasn't going to get at that. And so that's really what's changed. And so that's sort of like the focus on, okay, well, let's think a little bit, we need to think a little bit about the geography of our city. How are the decisions we're going to make impacting certain geographies? So I will come back to that in just a second, but that's kind of like the thing that has really changed. But again, so much that we're doing, so much of the existing policies that we have either are fair housing policies or anti-segregation or housing policies, or can be made to be so. And so again, we're not really starting over. And this is really important. Again, too often, I think especially in progressive places, we lose momentum towards actually making progress because we're constantly starting over again when we do these new planning processes. I wish they would stop calling it the housing element, because this is it's the housing element of the general plan, which is a process that you started multiple years ago and already won an award. But the way they work, it almost seems like they're totally unrelated processes. And that's a sad story about planning, which we'll talk about another time. So, okay, so those 2 points. Point number 3 is, I think for me, the most important thing to think about when you're thinking about affirmatively furthering fair housing, and the most important thing I think that the folks in Sacramento are going to look at when they evaluate your plan. So we're not going to try to like teach to the test, to use a metaphor, but I think it is important to think about what they're looking for, is to make sure that you think about all of the housing plans and all of the pieces in the housing element through this AFFH lens, right? Rather than doing your housing element here and then doing the AFFH stuff here and having them be sort of separate things. I think they're really going to be looking for an integrated approach, and I think this is really important. And so again, there are questions that we can ask about any housing policy that we decide is important for the city of San Rafael. And we can ask, does it exacerbate the segregation of the canal neighborhood, right? Does it in any way threaten the people in the canal neighborhood with displacement, right? Does it do things to integrate other communities in San Rafael that are less integrated? You can ask a series of questions about every housing policy. And I think, but that's going to be the important thing, not having one set of housing policies in the housing element and a separate set of actions in the AFFH appendix. Really make sure that they're integrated. And Barry and I have talked about it. Again, the city of Oakland just released its draft housing element. And the one good thing that it does is that, again, in every policy area that says, hey, we're going to do policies in this space, after laying out those policies, it takes a moment and thinks through like, okay, what is this going to do for fair housing? And I think that's the most important thing. And again, I'm really excited to help you all be a resource and to think through it. And the logic here is in some ways a little bit, one of the logics for both, like why this has changed and why that this integration is important is you can think about a little bit in similarity to some of the climate planning. So on the one hand, we've been doing environmental and climate planning for a very long time, but we're not really winning. So there's a kind of a current emphasis right now on really trying to move a little faster, take a little bit bolder steps. Same thing with segregation. Again, we've been doing it for a very long time, since the 1960s, but we've not made the progress that we need to make. And so there's just a greater sense of urgency. But the second thing, like with climate, is that we've learned certain things that look on the surface like they're really good ideas, at times don't always look like good ideas. So from one thing I think marine environmental groups are starting to learn is that by making decisions to preserve certain spaces in Marin County, we simply just push the housing and the traffic elsewhere and exacerbated our overall rate of climate change. We might have preserved a tree or two or certain areas which are nice, and that's admirable, but the overall impact of all the housing that didn't go into Marin County ends up in a place like Antioch, and all the driving or ends up in the Central Valley, and all of that driving over the Altamont Pass creates a massive climate impact. On the affordable housing, the equivalent would be something, again, like trying to concentrate all of the affordable housing in a neighborhood like the Canal. Again, it seems to make sense. In a lower income neighborhood, people need housing. You would provide a lot of resources. And there may be instances, again, where if Canal Alliance is part of it and they're saying, hey, listen, please cite this here, we need those resources, then that may be a decision that you're making. But it's just trying to get you to think, hey, let's think twice about that impact. Maybe this will actually have an unintended impact of exacerbating the problem and not making it better. And so that's, I think, the most important sort of other point is just, it's asking for a degree of reflection, this willingness to sort of think critically about what's going to happen. And that's one of the reasons why I'm excited to be here, is to help you all through this, because this stuff is difficult, and that's understandable. So I think that's number 3, right? Really just being aware that sometimes an action that seems like it will make sense won't help. Or sometimes what cities do is often they'll do one thing with the right hand and then the left hand will do something else, right? So you'll be really some sort of really restrictive parking policy that really ultimately makes it so that whatever other policy you're doing doesn't actually work. And so that's one of the things, again, that the AFFH lens will try to do. And then as a last point, and so just a framework for your thinking, is the maps, at least to me, and again, I'm quite happy, Amy, to talk about the maps and what they mean and what power they have. To me, the kind of core truth of the maps is you can see the canal and you can see the rest of San Rafael. And now there's some subtle differences between, Sun Valley and Peacock Gap being the wealthier or the whitest parts versus the rest of San Rafael. I'm wondering if that's surprising to anybody. I grew up in San Anselmo, and I know Sun Valley folks are always like San Anselmo, it's sort of like the closest to San Anselmo that you get. Again, this is familiar to me. I grew up going to Peacock Gap a lot because I went to Brandeis Hillel Day School and people lived in Peacock Gap. But when the state reads those maps, it's going to look for a set of actions from the city that do the right thing by the people of the canal, the people that are in the segregated neighborhood, a set of actions that really specifically try to do the right thing there. Now, what the right thing is something for us to discuss, but it's going to be something about the canal, in the canal. And it's going to look for a set of actions that try to create more opportunity outside of the canal. And I think that's one way, again, to frame it. If you were looking back at the end of the day, it's like, are we doing right by the canal? And then are we doing right by other people being able to move into other parts of San Rafael? And I think if we meet both of those challenges, I think we will, again, have a pretty good beginning. Because again, all of these things add up to what the state is looking for and what advocates are looking for and what former academics turned consultants are trying to help you all build. It's just a really, like Ali said, like a good faith effort. I think, a lot of people really love San Rafael. It's an amazing place. I think, for those, my cousin Carrie graduated from SR. Like, I know what it is to grow up in this community and to benefit from it, and just trying to provide more opportunity and really be a genuine actor here, and really not do, obviously you have to pass the test, but I like to think that we're taking the class because we really want to learn. We're really trying to do this kind of work and really trying to be successful here. And so I'm committed to working with you all on trying to be as successful as we possibly can on making some real positive steps, and just excited to be part of the conversation.
Thanks, Alex. Just a kind of protocol, how we're going to have this conversation now. I think, we'd like for the working group members to, engage in a discussion with Alex about some of what he's just talked about. Also want to just welcome Omar and Lorenzo and Rena. Sorry about the technical glitches with the access code today. So we're going to do this till around 5:15 or so, maybe 5:20, and then we wanted to hand it over to Ricardo at that point to talk more about outreach. So it's a small amount of time, and we hope that you're efficient with your words. Thanks. Amy, go ahead.
Yes.
Sorry to jump in. I just have to check on time. I'm so sorry, Amy. You said 5:15, but is this meeting not till 5:30?
No, we end at 6.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mine is just a procedural question. I heard Alex mention, and I want to be sure that I understand that our work on AFFH will be an appendix to the housing element report. Am I right?
There will be an appendix on AFFH, but then it's a bigger issue that is, throughout the housing element itself. That all those maps will be in an appendix.
Right, and I have many other issues than just the canal versus the rest, according to the map. So it was more than what Alex mentioned later.
Thanks. Okay, others wanted to make any responses or share thoughts? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, sorry, getting off mute. And apologies for my voice. I had a cold earlier this week. Yeah, I'm interested in finding out if there are any sort of case studies or success stories where communities like ours have become better integrated, and how they did it.
Alex, you want to respond or share anything?
Sure. So it depends on how you define communities like ours. So if you're talking about San Rafael specifically, I think Southern Alameda County is actually a really good example of jurisdictions that went from some of the most segregated places in America to some of the most diverse places in America. I mean, I think the people of San Leandro deserve a medal for really Dan Rather came to report on the sins of San Leandro in 1970. They were on CBS News nationally as an icon of segregation. And now it is, again, one of the most diverse places and home to a certain planning consultant. There we go, Ricardo. What's up? So that's, to me, those are the places that the southern cities of Southern Alameda County, to me, I think are the best examples. And they work somewhat actually for San Rafael. I mean, if you take San Rafael out of Marin County and you look at the size and the fact that it's always had a more diverse base, it's always had the jobs and a little bit of the industry. Again, part of the reason why the canal is the fact that industrial corridor is right there. And so if San Rafael is comfortable putting itself into these communities that were at the origin a little bit more working class communities and not very Marin in the way people think of it, I think those are some really, really excellent examples. Places like El Cerrito also I would put on that list as cities that I think have really tried, that are, again, not too dissimilar size. I think Concord is a really interesting, like I said, comparison for San Rafael to think of it about itself. Also what it's like to be the largest city in that space around it, have a similar kind of space. Again, Concord is currently really struggling with these issues, but I think those are some of the good comparisons to look at. And then another kind of maybe a comparison a little bit closer to home, I think Santa Rosa has done some pretty good work in trying to really kind of grow with its diversity and also embrace the fact that it's it's the city of Sonoma County. It's going to be a bit different. It's going to have to do things a little bit differently. And so those are the kind of places that I would look. I also sent, and I'm happy to send it around, some of the San Mateo County cities have also tried a little bit different. Some of them are just extremely wealthy and some of them are very, very small. But they're also pretty good places to look for.
So sorry, and just to follow up on that, like taking San Leandro as an example, like what are the top things that they did that were so effective? Maybe the top 3 things.
Well, I mean, the big part of it is that they, some of the practices that when they were, one of the things about San Leandro is that I think that they benefited from some of the practices that were made illegal. And because they were on the BART system and because they were sort of where they were there without having to do as much, they became much more integrated. And so that's why the only reason I hesitate to make the example is that within again, Marin is such by virtue of a lot of decisions in Marin County made over a very long period of time, Marin has become a pretty extreme example of a place. And so that's why I think a place like San Rafael hasn't kind of quote unquote naturally done it. And it's going to require another level of engagement. But in general, I mean, one of the things again, that those jurisdictions started to do is, in some of the industrial areas that they have started to build more condominiums, more townhouses. We're able to build more different types of housing in certain areas that were affordable to more different types of folks. I think those are the kinds of things that we can look at. Again, happy to talk about it. I do caution folks of looking too much into the past for examples. I think right now, if San Rafael is going to want to really do things, it's going to have to be willing to be a bit of a leader and just step out a little bit on a limb, I would say. Or, just again, it's going to be hard to find like really great comps of a really successful project.
Thanks, Alex. Other questions, comments, observations? Amy?
Thank you. Actually, I was wondering if now is the time to ask questions of Alex, or is Ricardo going to do his presentation?
We'll be talking with Alex for about another 20 minutes. And yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so what jumped out at me in a number, especially the race-based maps, something that I knew already coming from Chicago, and I think most of you know just because you have eyes, is how small our African-American population is here, and how that really begs for an adjustment in initiatives in San Rafael. It's really even hard for me with my background to walk down a street in San Rafael, and I'm lucky if I see one Black person. It isn't real world. So I just thought I'd throw out, it's like, this is very old-fashioned idea, but I thought I'd throw out the concept of bridging with Marin City, which is, according to the maps and something that most of us know, has a higher concentration of African Americans in some sort of a sister city kind of a situation where we could work together as two communities in the same county. That's why I asked about whether the regional issues are going to be discussed today at all, that somehow we could change that balance. And I was also extremely interested, something I knew living in Gerstle Park, that we are not a homogeneous neighborhood at all. We're a very heterogeneous neighborhood in virtually every single map. And there were a lot of surprises in the maps, but those are the two issues. Oh, something else. It seemed to me on the map that they're counting San Quentin as a population. So if you look at those race-based maps, that corner of the coastline is all Black. Mm-hmm. And like, is that really legal to do that, where people are being held against their will, that's considered to be a pocket of a certain, a race? So those are my suggestions. I'm throwing them out and questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. I know you all have a lot of questions and things to say about this topic. So who would like to make a comment before I put someone on the spot? Okay, there's a hand. Liz. You're on mute, Liz.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. I know lots of you. Happy to be here. Hi, I won't call you all out, people I've worked with before. I just wanted to make a comment to Amy's questions in the past. And there's a couple of things that I want to point out. And that is that there are actually numerically more Black people living in San Rafael than there are. Right. And so I said there are more African Americans living in San Rafael than there are in Marin City. And that's, I know, so I was surprised, not as a percentage, but as pure numbers. Linda, you've been hearing me do this speech for years, right? And so that's actually a really interesting point that you pointed out with, and I'm sure this is what we're going to be talking about with Ricardo and the outreach going forward, right, to raise that. And so partnerships are important, but I also wanted to point out that the San Quentin numbers, it's tricky because the San Quentin numbers are built in from a census tract perspective, but really they're pulled out of the housing element. We're looking at those numbers because we have to, just as you said, pull them out because we are state regulated and that's a federal prison. So we always have to manually pull that out. So I can't remember specifically which map or figure that was on this one, but the consultant that did it all has done that consistently across all the maps for all of the jurisdictions. And there was one other thing that I wanted to respond to you, and that was about sort of, working with the different areas. And I think that's what I think Alex is pointing out about historically, addressing those segregation patterns, and then of course doing things in a very collaborative.
Liz, I did not see one of those, I forgot what color represents African-American population of 27 people per dot. I didn't see
the numbers, right, because those aspects are percentile. So if I just asked you, Amy, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but this is kind of the work that I do. If I asked you what you thought the percentage of African Americans were living in Marin City right now, what percentage would you give?
I couldn't answer that question.
It's 24%. The largest percentage of people living in Marin City right now are Latinx, right? Hispanic and Latinx. And that's a trend. And that goes over to what Alex was saying before. I believe the question that John brought up, and that is one of the reasons some of these cities have become much more integrated, right, is because of gentrification, right? I mean, with these communities that were predominantly 90% African-American in 1960s, right, now have great views. And so the population has shifted and housing has changed. And so you'll see the kind of impact of those policies and practices changing the segregation and the segregation patterns in a community. And sometimes it's about a policy and sometimes it's just about economics.
These maps are on page 8, 9, and it's obviously it's really hard to read because they're so small, these dots. Mm-hmm. But I don't see, let's see, African-American or it's a green dot. I don't know that I see, and that is not a percentage.
It's not a percentage because it's less than the 3%. I'm just saying, but number
it equals 27 people. Each dot equals up to 27 people.
Amy, I'm just going to suggest we maybe put that.
We have that kind of. I just mentioned it because it was striking.
Got it. But thanks, and thanks, Liz, for that perspective. Again, I am gonna maybe ask Daniel. How about you? I'm looking at you in part because part of AFFH is looking to create affordable housing opportunities in parts of the city that haven't seen it in before, or where we're looking for sites in high resource areas. And we talked a little bit about this before. I'm curious from your perspective as an affordable housing developer, what your takeaway is.
Sure. I stayed silent because I'm not quite sure what we're supposed to be commenting on. I'm very familiar with AFFH in my work, so I didn't really have any questions along those lines. But I guess I would say that a lot of the items that I repeat almost every time on these calls is part and parcel with further affirming fair housing. And that is breaking down the roadblocks to build housing in communities that have high amounts of NIMBYism and resistance through ministerial streamlining of the planning process in these regions. So I don't really want to repeat everything I've said over the past however many calls. I would encourage everyone to think about those things that I've said and not repeat them necessarily here. But from my perspective, that is, and again, I'm going to start down this road again, but these types of tools are the ones that allow us to be able to actually develop sites in these types of communities where, and the idea that we're going to, have a higher population, disperse Santa Fe racially by building $2 million craftsman style homes in these certain areas is, laughable. So I would say that my thoughts are, yes, this is, the segregation is clear, and yes, we need to move forward a lot of the items we've talked about in further calls. but I don't know. Now those are my thoughts.
Okay, thanks. Yep, we can come back to it. I see Joanne and John have their hands up, so let's hear from Joanne first and then John.
Thanks, Barry. I'm kind of in the same place Daniel is. It's a meaty topic, and it's a little bit hard to do and digest all of it. And Alex, I would love to get your book, and I'd love to read the chapter on Marin for sure and understand. I understand a lot of it, but it's always good for us to refresh it. But I think one of the things some of the language in the current housing element, which really drives me crazy, is it says something about fitting the character of our neighborhood. And so that means it's an obstacle to build a multi-family unit building because it doesn't fit in the character of your neighborhood. So if you live in a neighborhood with a lot of single family homes, then you're maybe uncomfortable with having that. And so I think that's where we need to get to, is having, being like San Leandro and building townhouses and condos and multifamily units throughout our entire city, so that we do have diversity and we have many levels of affordability of housing throughout the city. So, I mean, that's where I'm sitting right now. And that's just the comment that I wanted to make. Thanks,
Joanne. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was going to make the same comment as Joanne, actually. I have confidence in that approach of essentially, increasing the amount of multifamily housing in the single family home neighborhoods. And I was wondering if the speaker had any examples of cities that can do it. Joanne mentioned San Leandro. And so if that's the case, that's great. But tactically speaking, like, I'm curious as to how, San Leandro or other cities actually did that. Did they use, for instance, like an overlay? I worked on the downtown precise plan. Are there some cities who perhaps use something equivalent to a downtown precise plan, but in the neighborhoods to streamline development of multifamily homes and low-cost housing in the single family home neighborhoods without, causing too much disruption? I have this idea that we could potentially use an approach like that, or like an overlay to, get feedback from the community, basically like front load the feedback in the community. So any sort of multifamily homes that we add to the single family home areas blend in well. And don't cause a lot of disruption. Like, they're consistent in the architectural style and they're not too big. But at the same time, they're zoned in such a way that perhaps a developer can work on multiple sites at one time or something like that to make it more cost efficient. So I'm looking for examples like that. I'm just wondering if the speaker knows of any examples like that we could use sort of as a premise.
I'll let Alex respond too, but I just wanted to chime in a little bit before you do. I happen to be the one who did the last two general plans for San Leandro. And what they had in that city was a lot of industry that was not in an industrial area, but along the railroad that went through a lot of residential areas. And as those industries closed, most of those sites were converted to housing, and they were converted to housing at higher densities and not the same densities as the adjacent neighborhoods. The other thing you had in San Leandro was a little bit like what you have in Terra Linda, where all of the housing that's there was built at a particular point in time right after the war, and the generation that lived in that housing, they died. I mean, 1990s, early 2000s, and it all turned over. All of the housing in that area turned over. And so you had a lot of folks coming in from other cultures, other countries that had different attitudes and perspectives about what was compatible, coming from other cities and other countries where there was more differentiation and density in a neighborhood than what we were used to here. So it changed in that way. I see a couple of hands up now, so I'm excited. We're going to get to hear from a few more people. Alex, did you want to add anything?
Well, no, what I would say, given time, maybe you want to let Omar and Linda and anybody else who want to ask the question, then I can address all the questions at the end.
Sounds great. Omar, go ahead. And there you go.
And Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for being late. I was actually in a meeting discussing about the Canal Alliance housing strategy, so apologies for it. Again, similar to Daniel, I don't want to repeat myself constantly. I have been advocating is let's not just summarize the current housing crisis that we have is due to a supply and demand, a supply issue. I think it's part of it, and I think we all agree. But we need to also incorporate in this conversation on the housing element process the importance to respond to the needs of low-income tenants. And I think the housing element process is the important space to do that. And I'm happy that the city, I'm sure we're gonna hear more from Ricardo about the efforts to make an intentional and proactive effort to solicit and incorporate input from low-income people. Most of them, I will say, are renters. So I think I don't know if it's a question, Alex, or more like a comment, but I think the integrating the voices and perspectives in the housing element process is a legal requirement. And I'm sorry if you already spoke that earlier, I missed that, but also an important pathway to ensuring robust policies to address the needs of renters. So I think having a balance, a healthy balance between a supply issue, but also the fact that the lack of tenant protections have contributed to the housing crisis that we have in Marin County and perhaps even in the state of California is important for us to discuss and incorporate in these conversations.
Thanks, Omar. Linda?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just a couple of comments for the local insight into a map. So I'm looking at the map on page 33, which is about educational outcomes. And a question about the very large orange area that shows a lower, this isn't really just educational outcomes. It includes graduation rates, school scores, which I'm not sure where that comes from. I gather these are all put together in Sacramento by state agencies, so they wouldn't know, but Dominican and Peacock are our higher income areas, and those schools actually do quite well. The Canal neighborhood has a lot of English learners, immigrant families and their English learners. We do know that when our English learners are reclassified as fully English proficient and ready to do the academic work in English, they actually score better than anybody else. But it's that transition to becoming bilingual or trilingual, as the case may be, is really hard work for students. We just reclassified 187 district-wide this week. And it's a great news for those students, but we have to, really, we've got a lot of supports in place to help our English learners learn English and then also deal with all the other economic factors affecting their lives. So the question I have for map 33 is why Peacock and Dominican are on this as being lower than 25%. This kind of information is can be damaging to public education. And they can be used for promoting vouchers in charter schools, which further damage public education. So I just want to be really careful. And I'm a school board member in San Rafael, so I've been looking at this data for 16 years now. And certainly Sun Valley does well. I'm surprised at Bret Hart, but I don't. So I just, through the local lens of a local school board member, this map doesn't quite reflect it. And I would also challenge we have schools across our city. You cannot tell one school from another if you go on a tour in terms of the quality of the instruction. So it's not like in some parts, the schools are much better in a wealthy neighborhood than in another. In our case, it's a reflection, as this talks about, is for lower income students and the challenges that they have. So that's one reflection on that map. And the other one is on the last one, or the second to the last one, map 45, which is about vulnerable to displacement. And so I'm just curious why Dominican is in that. Certainly Montecito would be, and maybe it's because Montecito and Dominican are lumped together. Montecito would be vulnerable to displacement. Dominican is largely single family. The same with Lincoln Hill. Along Lincoln Hill Avenue, along Lincoln Avenue, it's all apartments, so they'd be vulnerable to displacement. But the single family homes in the Hill are not. I don't know, Gerstle Park has some apartments mixed in, so maybe that's how that got there. And then Bret Hart has got some apartments on Woodland, and maybe that's how that's there. But we know that the issue of displacement with redevelopment is a big issue in the canal. And my concluding thought is that all of these maps really reinforce the very beginning census data and that demographics that you put together with your team, Barry, at the beginning of the project. So no surprises.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah, I actually would like to respond to some of that. I think what you've just said is really important for us to all think about, because it's not just about the maps and the data, it's about the local knowledge of what's the real story, what's going on here, what's causing the numbers to look like they are. And it may not always be poverty in the sense, I mean, like Dominican, that may be, it's part of the metric there is low income, and maybe the students that are living in dorms on the campus have low incomes, and it's a concentration of students that's causing that to appear that way. I took a look at that map and I thought, wait a minute, Dominican is not a low resource area, but it shows up that way on the map. So we need to put our own lens on this information and the data and push back a little bit in the way we describe it and the way we use it. I think a lot of this, you take it with a grain of salt and you explain why it may not be what it seems when you just look at that map, which does come from the state. In that case, I think those are the tax credit maps, and they're based on certain metrics that are used in Sacramento.
And I just want to share one program, an example of the kind of program that can be done, but it's not related to housing. So the school district has entered into a contract with the community-based organization to hire teachers who are African-American, new teachers, and give them a cohort. So they're together to work for a couple of years and see if they make it through. And also to work with them on housing and to live together. And so this is a nonprofit that works in other parts of the Bay Area, and we're very excited. We've been fairly successful in hiring our own Latinx graduates to come back and work in San Rafael schools, but we're excited to be expanding the teachers of color in San Rafael schools as well. And that program starts up next year, I believe.
Thanks. We're going to go to Don and then Amy. If anyone else would like to comment on this before we go to Ricardo, if you could use your raise hand button now. Beyond that, I think I'd like to make sure we have enough time for Ricardo and to talk more about outreach. So I'll look around between now and Amy. Okay, go ahead, Don.
I just wanted to comment that it's a mistake to draw a parallel between racial equity and economic equity. And we've mentioned Dominican, mostly single family homes. The largest home in our neighborhood is owned by a Black family who's the head of a hedge fund company. The next very large home was owned by a vice president of Fireman's Fund who's now been transferred somewhere else. But they're actually the only Black families I've seen, and they actually live in the most expensive houses in the neighborhood. And more recently, my experience has been, particularly since the pandemic, is Asian families moving from the city. And they're paying very high prices for single family homes here, but they're Asians, whereas before, or historically, there were no Asians here. So I think it is important not to necessarily equate the racial equity with economic equity. And I certainly agree with what Amy said about I've never been able to understand why in San Rafael you see so few Black people. Whereas when I did some census work a little while ago, months ago, Novato, as a percentage, had more Black residents than San Rafael did. And that was a real surprise to me. And I don't quite understand why that would actually be the case. But those are my comments.
Thanks, Don. Go ahead, Amy, and Linda will give you the last on this.
Sure.
And we'll...
Thank you. And I just wanted to mention to Linda that I flagged those very same pages plus page 35 with this lack of educational formula for Dominican and Peacock Gap. And my guess was that there were just so few children who attended the schools. But I think you may be right about the lower income students who live in Dominican. I also just wanted to mention that I did research, and I sent this information to Barry, that only 1.5% of San Rafael's population is African-American, according to the 2020 census. So it is very low. And then what else did I want to say? Oh yeah, I just want to call everybody's attention. I'm sure you saw this. Now I've spoken of environmental justice before, and this is real. If you look at map 25 and you look at the Cal Enviro screen, I actually agree with Alex big time that the answer to fair housing for this city moving forward is not necessarily, and I know I'm going against in many ways state law, but not necessarily building where the transportation is. Because that's where the air is the worst. That's where the pollution is the worst. So if you look at that map, 71 to 80% of the Cal Enviro screen percentile in the canal is the second highest, and only higher in San Rafael is the area surrounding the canal, near the bridge. So these are real issues for people. Just because you're poor doesn't mean you have to live in an environmentally toxic setting. And so, yeah, I'm all about like moving housing developments into greener neighborhoods, and those housing, which is why, and I know that I sound, like a broken record here, those housing developments that many people want to fast track need to have green in them. So when we're talking about building, we're talking about building safe and healthy developments, not just how fast we can squeeze people into small areas. So enough of that.
Thanks, Amy. I'm wondering if Linda and Daniel, if you guys can hold your thoughts for just a moment, and because I would like to make sure we have enough time to talk with Ricardo, and if we might want to move on to the discussion of outreach at this point, and we'll have some time at the end for additional questions and comments. But Ricardo, I'm going to turn it over to you at this point. Thanks.
Thank you all very much. 1 second. First, thank you, everybody. I'm happy to be with you here again, participating in some of this work. I have a big favor to ask, an indulgence, if you would. I had a miscommunication with the team, and I thought that meeting ended at 5:30, which is why my question to you very earlier. So if I could ask for a 5-minute human break at 5:30, I'd appreciate that. I'll go take care of what I need to do and be back, and we can continue the conversation. I hope that's okay. That way I could stay on until 6. I just gotta
totally fine.
Appreciate it. All right, so lots to say. I mean, there's so much. Linda, do you have a question, or is that from before? Just want to make sure I'm following here. So lots to say, and I know when they said you got 30 minutes to talk about these topics, I'm just like with all the folks in the room, it's just going to be very difficult. So what I'm hoping is just to begin to kind of broad strokes ideas to share with you. About these questions, about these issues, about this opportunity. So I'll start by saying that I came in 2018 to San Rafael through some colleagues of mine. I met Barry, and as you heard, we worked on some housing and general plan engagement. And so I know a lot of folks talk about outreach, but from the very beginning, my conversation with the city manager, with Barry, with the team was, I'm really much more interested in capacity building. But that side, I think we need to be doing. Outreach just seems like we talk to folks, we check boxes, we host a meeting on a Saturday, we provide lunch, and and daycare, and we call it a day. But that's not real. That's not substantive. That's not what's really going to get us to where we need to be. These are folks who are the engine of the economy, whose communities are providing the sales tax base for the city, all the very 30% of the population, all the reasons why they in fact are critical to the community, but they don't have a voice in the typical ways that they should. So my interest has always really been around capacity building, and we continue to do some of that work and some of that visioning with Christine, who's on the call here, that will be in tandem to the work that we're discussing tonight. And so I want to ask you, Barry, if you don't mind, could you, I'm going to put you on the spot, and hope that's okay, but can you just frame again, like, what do you want me to do here? So that we're all on the same page, and what do you want to get out of the next 27 minutes, minus 5 minutes for the human break, but yeah.
Sure thing, sure thing. Yeah, and so I think what we were hoping to get out of it is really to talk about the aspect of AFFH that deals with outreach. Basically, is telling us we need to do things differently in the future than the way we've been doing it in the past. That when we have a community workshop, we know who's going to show up, and it's usually a dozen or 20 people. How can we make our outreach programs in general related to housing more effective, more inclusive, more meaningful? How do we reach the people who don't come to meetings? And I mean, I think this is an area where we can hear from our working group as well, but through your experience, through your lens, and others on the screen who are, who are asking the same question. And it's really, I think, kind of helping us understand what it takes to be authentic in our outreach and to hear the real story.
Fantastic. Christine, I want to open it up to you too, if you've got something to add, because you and I have been partnering on this for a while now. We've got a long road ahead of us with some of this work. Any thoughts you want to add to that of what we should be focused on for this conversation?
No, thanks, Ricardo, for the opportunity. I think that we've got two things that we're talking about. One is what is the specific outreach approach we're going to take within the context of this housing element, right? And then the kind of broader, kind of macro, how are we doing this more inclusive kind of resident engagement across the city, across all policies and programs? And there's a nexus there. So yeah, I think that speaking to maybe some of the less traditional ways of doing community engagement, and some of the conversations we've had about what are we doing differently, and the why behind what we're doing differently, I think from your perspective would be really helpful.
Great. So we are on the same page. And so let me see, just to make sure I understand. So I'm going to do some broad strokes, tell you a little bit about how I frame things, what I'm hoping we can do in the long term, but then hand it over to the group to begin to share ideas, kind of brainstorm, kind of in a quick fashion, to get more robust answers to that question. Like, I'm just one person with one particular perspective. You all are in and from the community. So ideas from you, I think, is really what we're trying to get, so that they brought me in because of the experience that I've had with Barry in the Canal community, and now in Tiburon as well, and other places, but really to kind of solicit from you all some ideas. So I'll mention a couple of things. So back in 2018, I came to work with Barry and Omar, and the approach that we took was a little unconventional from typical planning top-down Saturday meetings, charrette kind of approach. And so what we did was, in my one of my hats that I wear is I'm a faculty at UC Berkeley in city and regional planning. And so what I said, listen, if we're going to do real outreach and engagement, we need to make sure that we raise the floor of people's understanding of what's at stake, what the roles and responsibilities are, what rights do they have to even ask for better planning in their community, and all of the different manifestations, whether it's transportation, safety, cleanliness, open space, access to open space, all of those things these folks in these communities have a right to. They just don't know how it all works. And so what we did over the course of several weeks was, working with an existing leadership group, was to build their awareness of planning processes, terms, government entities, basically like a city planning 101, what I do with my class at UC Berkeley in Spanish, in ways that people found accessible. And it was very remarkable. You know, we pulled out a big map, a zoning map, and just kind of looking at it and explaining, like, even if you had a bunch of money and lots and lots of money, you wanted to build a few units on a lot to bring in your family, these are the places you can't do it. Why is that? Because it's zoned. Well, who makes that decision? Aha, it's the general plan. And so these like kind of aha moments for folks were like, wait a minute. So we can actually change the zone. So yeah, you could work on changing the zone. Like every time we do the general plan, it's an opportunity for you to give your input. And you are 30% of the population, and you're, you know, a big portion of the economy. You have a right. So that was really a phenomenal experience, and for me, for sure. But for those folks who I see them in meetings here and there, and they're saying, "When are you going to come back?" So we're working on it. Christine's working on it. But it just speaks to the way that the engagement turned from outreach, community education to community empowerment, community partnership, community capacity. I also often talk about capacity building at the level of the city and county folks as well. That is just not a deficit model for communities. We got to move away from that. But there's also an opportunity to think about how do we build capacity among city staff and city leaders to be able to see and engage and be receptive to the participation of these communities. And so the work that we did with Barry actually transformed into some work that Christine and Omar and I did, and Joanne, who's on the call as well. Hi, Joanne. Called the Canal Policy Working Group. That was a response to the pandemic. And it's a perfect example of when we first started. I think it was like 80% of the cases were in Canal neighborhood. 80% of the cases were in Canal neighborhood. And so we talked to folks, and not naming names, but we can all imagine the response was like, well, we're doing this, and we've done this, and we've done this, and we're also doing this. And we're like, great, thank you. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. But whatever it is, it's either not the right thing or it's not enough. And so what we were proposing is to really engage with community around all of the different methodologies for addressing pandemic recovery, from health to housing to economic development. And that really shifted the response from the city. And I think it's, you know, one of the projects I'm most proud of. So that sort of lays out kind of broad strokes. As we move forward, earlier there was a comment, and I can't remember who it was, and I wanted to jump in, but I think it was Omar. Omar, you were talking about, you know, like longer term commitments to this work. This is the ideal for me, and maybe tell me if I'm off script, but if as a consultant coming into this work, I would say to you as a team, like, what comes after? I think you have 2 more meetings. What comes after this? And how can you maybe partner with Christine in the work that she's doing with community engagement, capacity building, to make this a longer term commitment? And so that we're talking about housing, but the intersection of housing and economic development, the intersection of housing and climate resilience. We know the fires, the smoke, the sea level rise are all things that affect communities of color, low-income communities much more than they affect other folks. So I think, you know, thinking about a long-term institutional commitment to what this actually means, where you can actually have a vehicle by which you can actually move these things along. And I think oftentimes, you know, it's a one-time thing. You have a few meetings, or the working group comes together and then disbands. But I do think that there's an opportunity here. I think when Alex opened the conversation, you know, talking about what he first saw in San Rafael and seeing the opportunity, that's been my whole thing all along. There is something going on in San Rafael in the last few years that's really transformative. I mean, the politics are shifting. People are really wanting to do better by their neighbors, by their fellow, and the way that you all talk about this work really speaks to that. And so there's an opportunity to take advantage of that and partner with folks who we think are not on our side, but it is mutually beneficial to have developers and large institutions and big employers to be part of helping us design housing solutions that are comprehensive, that are speaking to the intersection with other big issues. I want to stop there. So just kind of, that was the framework of what I'm hoping we will do, what I'm working with Christine to do, what seems to be successful with communities. And my experiences most recently is with the Latino community in Canal, but I've got experience outreaching and community and capacity building with many other communities that are also listed as part of the groups that we want to be working with. So it's a point of departure to work with the Latino community because they're the largest community, but it's a way for us to establish some success and some testing, you know, piloting the work to then go out and do this in other communities as well. So I'll stop there and open it up for, I guess the question is, okay, so less comments, if that's okay, and really more about like, what are you hearing with what I said that resonates and you'd like to see more of? And the other question is, what are other ways that we can do better around facilitating the engagement of people? So capacity building, both at the city level and leadership level, but also in the community level. So for example, one idea is working with existing leadership groups, not starting from zero, but really with folks who've already stepped up. And how do we build their capacity? What's the partnership? How do we put some funds in their pocket so that they can show up to these meetings educated? So, you know, we know that the Sierra Club, the environmental groups, the bike folks, they've got the wherewithal, they've got good spokespeople, they know the language, they know the mechanisms. We need to raise the floor for everyone to have an equal playing field so that folks can speak the language that's necessary to enact the kinds of change they want to see.
Thanks, Ricardo. Anyone care to start off with a question, comment, some feedback? I might look to Omar for maybe some comments as well, just given your partnership with Ricardo and the work you've done together and some of what the Canal Alliance is hearing and ways to reach the folks you work with and engage them.
Thank you, Barry, and thanks, Ricardo. I know I do appreciate the leadership from the city of San Rafael and really highlighting the importance to provide a space for low-income residents to participate in this very important planning exercise. Usually, one of the reflections that we have in the 2040 during the 2040 general plan from the residents of the canal is they didn't even know there was a plan in place. Right? They didn't even see themselves inside that plan. So I think it's very important to recognize that they are 30% of the population in San Rafael, and they should be part of this planning of this, future planning. So I don't know what the conversations, Ricardo, perhaps you can just help us understand the scope of those conversations with the residents of the canal. This group has benefited from multiple sessions to talk about potential sites that we can develop, zoning, programs that the city have right now, the pros and cons of them. I'm just wondering what is going to be how long we're going to engage the residents so that they can actually, to your point of labeling the platform to provide input, what is the scope of those conversations and for how long we're going to be engaging them?
I think, and I'm going to pass it over to Christine, but so what I could say is that I'm just going to note and reiterate what you said, Omar, that there is a deep desire from lots of community members to be engaged. I mean, I was just shocked and amazed because typically it's like you're trying to pull teeth to get people to show up, but these folks are committed. They'll do the work day in and day out of representing and showing up and getting the vote out and all that kind of work. They just do it. So there's clearly an opportunity that we need to jump on. And that's why I'm working with Christine. So Christine, do you want to say more about, I don't know how much detail we have now to share that, but yeah.
I'm sorry, Ricardo, I want to be helpful, but what specific, you mean like the inclusive resident engagement work that we did? And
I think Omar's asking for what does the future look like for the outreach, community engagement, capacity building, the stuff that we're working on longer term. And I don't know that we have those details set.
Yeah, I think I'll just speak to it conceptually. And I think just a couple of points. One is the city is last fall and in the winter, we held a couple of community conversations and we started bringing more folks in with a deliberate and looking at our partners, looking at Canal Alliance, Multicultural Center of Marin and other nonprofits to help be that bridge, the trusted messengers to bring more voices and kind of, I know it sounds a bit cliche, but meeting people where they're at, having Spanish language meetings. So meetings in native language for folks has been a request we've been hearing. We've been trying to do that more often. The partnership with Voces del Canal has been really powerful. And I want to express some gratitude to Omar and his organization and leadership. That partnership, I'll just give a micro example that is something that has very recently worked very well that we want to try to continue to replicate and kind of force multiply. We have a park and rec master planning process going on right now. So we have all these master plans. And when it comes to capacity building, if you want to go to community members who are traditionally marginalized or haven't had voices represented and say, well, what do you think about this? It's a little bit daunting. And so we, for everyone really, like what's really relevant? How do we make our questions and our inquiry culturally competent and relevant to the lived experience of all the people in San Rafael? So that takes a lot of effort and intention and education on the part of city staff and city leadership as well, to really understand how do we do this differently. The Park and Rec Master Plan, we partnered with Osastel Canal, and we are through Canal Alliance paying stipend, having the meeting in Spanish, having the format co-designed by leaders and members of the community to say, can you help us bring more participants, and can you help us design the format of the discussion, or what does this outreach look like? What does the conversation look like? So rather than a PowerPoint for 45 minutes and then we ask everybody in the room what they think, what works, what's really, which is frankly a very traditional method of going out and having community meetings. So what we're doing instead is we're really working together to co-create and co-design a much more empowered experience. And I just have to say it's working incredibly well, but we're going to have to do a lot more of it, and it takes a lot of time and commitment from everybody. Was that helpful? I hope.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. It was helpful in the long term, and I think perhaps what I was interesting to know more about it, and is particularly around the housing element. And I know that there are some deadlines that we had to meet, and the engagement with low-income residents around the housing element has not happened yet. So I was wondering if we are gonna do something to engage them in the conversation that this group has had in relationship to zoning, to existing policies, to sites, and really to share what is the vision that they have for their city and for their neighborhood. I was wondering if they're gonna have an opportunity to participate and contribute to this work.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's something that we're working on a detailed plan. And the reason I use the Park and Rec Master Plan kind of partnership that we had with Canal Alliance and Voces del Canal is because that's a model that we want to use for how we want to do the engagement and conversations. We've got time. So we're in the process of building kind of a strategy. And I think, I'm going to look to Barry. I think that we're asking, that's part of Liz's bringing Liz on as a consultant to the city team. She's done a lot of this deep work at the county. So we're developing kind of that strategic plan behind the scenes on how we want to do that in the most meaningful way over the next few months. We know the summer's going to be tricky, but you know, we've got a span of time, and we want to do it very intentionally. So we don't have like a perfect plan for you tonight to unfold, but we are definitely working on it, and it's a top priority.
Yeah, and I'll just add, thank you, Christine. I'll just add to that you know, that is one of the reasons that you see Liz and Ricardo and Alex here today, is that, you know, we're all kind of collaborating on our next steps, not just for the housing element, but for the whole housing program direction that we want to go in. That's kind of you know, the core of the housing element. I see a few hands up, and I just want to make sure we have time for folks to engage in some conversation and questions. So let me go with Joanne, and then Diana, and then Linda.
Joanne, can I go right before you, just so I could step away?
Yes.
Thank you, and I apologize, I've got to do this. So I also just want to say this one last framing work, that it has to be an all hands on deck. You know, when we think about housing, we put the onus, the burden on the folks who are suffering from decades and billions of dollars of investment for this bad housing pattern that we've had in the United States, Bay Area, car-centric. And so we really have to think like they're the starting point, they're the equity point, but it's not going to happen if we don't have the business community with us, developers with us, the big institutions. I know I said that, but I want to be very clear, because what was very clear in the Canal Policy Working Group was the support, the link, the partnership with, through Joanne, the business community, looking out not just for landlords, landowners, business owners, but folks who had businesses who were renting their space. But really, every time I talked to them was the employees, because that's that partnership, the employees and the business, there's not one without the other. So I just want to mention that as we move forward, we have to think about broadening who's part of the conversation. Thank you, and I'll be back in 5 minutes.
Okay. Thanks, Ricardo. Joanne, where'd you go?
Well, that was a perfect segue because, and I didn't know he was going to do that, because relative to what Omar was saying earlier, Christine, is, you know, just because I'm sitting on this group doesn't mean you're really hearing from business owners, right? So it's like checking the box. Okay, the business community's been heard from. No, that's not what it is. And so I'm here to facilitate that outreach, and that has happened to me in different, you know, departments throughout the city where I've been asked to participate, but it's like, no, you need to hear from my members, and how can I help you with that? So I just wanted to make that comment, and I appreciated what Ricardo said as well.
Thanks, Joanne. Diana.
Yeah, I want to build on that because there are a lot of older adults in San Rafael that have low income, and that their voices need to be heard. And I represent the Marin County Commission on Aging, and we can step in that role and help you hear those voices. What has happened over the pandemic is that older adults were the first to lose their jobs. They lost their health care, then they lost their homes, and many of them are now living in cars. So, or homeless. And this trend really was increased during the pandemic. And our focus on the Commission on Aging is bringing those issues to the fore. And I think it's extremely important.
Thanks, Diana. And I note too that the age-friendly San Rafael plan identifies housing as one of the top priorities for the older adult population, and has some recommendations specifically that we would like to build on and include in the housing element.
Yeah, there's I'm on the age-friendly, we're called the Age-Friendly San Rafael Community Partnership now. Okay. And housing is just right at the top of the list. We have a lot of, use Aldersley as an example. There are a lot of open places to live there, but no one can afford them. So one of the things we wanted to look at is how possibly can we mitigate the costs of those living situations? And one of the ways to do them is around healthcare, because most of the people that live there have Medicare, but the residential facilities will charge more for additional medical services. So there are a lot of ways to look at this, but older adults in Marin are becoming more and more marginalized.
Thank you. Linda?
Yeah, I just want to, I'm going to ask Lorenzo for his comments because he's been with us this whole time, and I'd love to hear his thoughts on community outreach in San Rafael. But I want to note that it's more than just the Canal neighborhood. Those maps show that there are neighborhoods and communities across San Rafael that need to have outreach. It's not just the concentrated area with the most number, it's everybody. And it's how do we reach the people living in the affordable housing, the apartments in Terra Linda, and how do we reach the people on Lincoln Avenue and in Montecito neighborhood and in Gerstle Park and in Woodland Avenue. So I just put that challenge out to you in your outreach that it's not. And I also note that time is running out, folks. We need to be in public hearings. So I'm a little nervous about the fact that there really isn't a program for us to look at today. But Barry, that's your challenge with them, is to make that work, because in the summer, it's very hard to have a workshop. Now, kids are back in school in mid-August, about the third week, and that's when families are back and people are paying attention a little bit more, but that is late for this process to be able to have meaningful input. So that's my challenge. And Lorenzo, I don't want to put you on the spot. I was going to say, I don't want to do that, but no, I want to hear what you have to say about outreach and what you know about our community, about San Rafael, and what you can contribute.
Wow. That's for me to share is not a problem. Linda, thank you. And I've been sitting here. I'm sorry, folks, I missed the first half. your conversation, but I heard something that was very striking for me. And just to let you know, I'm very deep in a thought right now around race, because I have to lead some listening circles tomorrow with a group of probably about 400 people on the murder of innocent Black lives in Buffalo. And how it connects to this group or this conversation is that that was in their community. And the business was in that community. So there's many different connectors to this conversation. So forgive me if I'm a little bit sensitive right now around this conversation around Blacks in San Rafael and why aren't there many Blacks in San Rafael? So I'm glad you asked the question of why. And I can only share from my perspective, two things that come to mind for me is belonging and safety. Belonging and safety. And so when I mention those two things, those are central to communities, as it is in the Canal or Marin City or any other community. We don't necessarily have that here to the largest degree in San Rafael. And so when we talk about, yeah, there's some pockets of San Rafael. I think I heard someone mention the president of Fireman Funds who used to live here in San Rafael. He was my neighbor, so I know him very well. And so for me, the importance of community is extremely high on our list. As an example, I'm a kind of a casual musician, and I go over to the East Bay every weekend to drum. I go over to First Fridays every month to experience that diverse experience. First Friday of the month, Telegraph Road shuts down. If you want to see diversity, if you want to see people coming together, if you want to see belonging, that's an experience that we don't have in San Rafael. So why is it that Blacks are not necessarily living in San Rafael? You can't separate racial, you can't separate social, you can't separate economic justice. They're all intertwined. And so how do we reach the community, the minority of the community that are here in San Rafael? Yes, when we talk about you got to talk their language, what is the language? Hey, it's belonging. We need your support. We need your voice. And so it's interesting that you asked me the question, Linda, what do I think? And I'm going to give you a perspective, team. And this is me being very real, very vulnerable. If I'm out and about in San Rafael, and Christine and others, Joanne, know the work that I do. I do a lot of work in Marin County. But yet when I walk through a grocery store and I see another Black person, it's like, whoa, you're here too? That is the armor that we have to have when we're walking through an environment that doesn't reflect who we are. So what do you do to build and to increase the diversity? It's bringing the tools, bringing the resources, given, let's say, the businesses as an example. We're talking about the business community. I can probably name maybe 3 Black restaurants, maybe 2 in San Rafael, right? So if I want food that is reflective of my culture, that's reflective of my culture, where am I going to go? I'm going to the East Bay and I'm going to the city. If those businesses were here, would I stay to dine? Absolutely. Absolutely. Would I come out of my house to dine? Absolutely. Right? So those are some of the thoughts that are running through my head right now. And forgive me because I'm in this zone of this experience of race relations right now and how it's impacting the hate that's impacting our community. So when we talk about not in our backyard, when we talk about how do we build bridges, it's the neighbors that's sitting next to us who might silently or quietly have some biases that they are feeling, and then all of a sudden they're sharing it in a setting that's not very inviting. So that's all I have to say. So thanks for giving me. And Linda, I don't know who prompted you or where you got a prompt, but it's hard for me to sit still sometimes, and so I'm gonna go back on mute. But that's all I have to share.
Can I respond, and then just I wanted to make a comment on some of the outreach feedback real briefly. Lorenzo, thank you for always showing up with your whole self, and really respect and admire you for those comments. Thank you so much. Really mean it. And thank you for doing that work, for doing that listening session work. And I'll be sending you lots of good energy. Thank you so much for doing that work. I just wanted to briefly say that to, I think, Joanne and Diana, and Linda, just a little reassurance that, and appreciation for your comments about when we talk about doing inclusive resident engagement. You know, I was giving some examples of some of the work we've partnered recently in the canal, but you're absolutely right. And one of the asks I was going to make of this group as we're developing this outreach plan is we need all of you as kind of sponsors and connectors to say, you know, Joanne, if we're going to try to have some really specific targeted outreach with the business community, for example, can you help us? You know, can we come to a meeting that's already established? Can we, you know, how can we do that in a way that, again, meeting people where they're at, rather than saying, you need to come to us at a meeting at 7 o'clock. How are we going to meet with the folks who are fearing displacement or aging population who, you know, we've got to come up with a unique strategy. It's got to be customized, and we've got to be creating psychologically safe spaces where people feel like they can show up and not really know what we're talking about yet. And we're going to bring them in and give them the information they need to engage in a meaningful conversation and be able to share their lived experience in a way that, and I'll just say, like, I love the city of San Rafael, and I've worked here for 6 years, but we need to do better. Local government needs to do better in this space. And that's why you're seeing more partnerships in this room, because we're really committed to that, but we need help. So if you're open to helping us in that regard, that would be really appreciated.
Thanks, Christine. And I see Amy has her hand up. I think after Amy, I just want to give Ricardo and and Alex a chance for any final comments. And we've got some closing comments before we move to the close of the meeting at 6 o'clock. But let's go with Amy, and I see then Daniel after that.
Thank you. In light of what Lorenzo said and the statistics that I cited, and Christine's willingness, along with Linda's statement about let's do some more outreach and let's do it fast to communities that we haven't, I would like to suggest that there be a specifically targeted outreach to the African-American community in San Rafael, and see what can be done to make this a more welcoming community to people they know, to their family members. I mean, you probably all, I mean, who was at the May Madness event? It was at least half Black. I mean, there was so many African-Americans streaming down our streets who were interested in cars. It was all about cars, you know? And I was like, wow, is this beautiful? Look at our city is integrated. And then of course, people go home. So anyway, I really would like to see that kind of a thread enter into this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Daniel?
Sorry, my hand was up from an earlier time. I don't know if we'll get back to comments from earlier that we postponed, but.
Go ahead, that's fine.
No, we should wrap this up because it's an important discussion first.
Thanks. Any other comments? I'm gonna see if Ricardo, if you wanted to have any closing comments, or Alex, if you wanted to make any additional comments before I close this out.
Alex, do you want to go first?
Sure. So just quickly, again, just excited to try to work with you all and with Barry and with staff and on getting real ideas down on paper that will be able to advance things. And the one thing, and I would just encourage folks to try to take a real both and approach. So it's going to require all sorts of different types of housing strategies, from protecting vulnerable low-income tenants. One thing I heard is people talked about single-family houses as necessarily owned houses, but many of them are rented. And apartment buildings are often condominiums and have owner occupants. It's really important that we don't sort of make the mistake of assuming one thing, especially right now. And again, that's one thing that really is important to pay attention to, is the owner, that I'm encouraging all of my folks to pay attention to, is the ownership structure of the housing that will be built, really trying to find ways to build more condominiums, build more home ownership opportunities for younger folks to establish a home. I think, again, there are solutions in Gerstle Park, there are solutions in the Dominican neighborhood, there are solutions in downtown, there are solutions in the canal. And I think that we all want to see there's a housing solution in all of those places for all the specific communities that live there, and for new people that we want to welcome, obviously, to be part of San Rafael in different ways. I, again, really appreciate y'all taking the time. Again, I will talk more, John. I know you want to, I'm happy to talk specific planning in downtown and things that we can do. There's so much exciting stuff that is happening in terms of ADUs and duplexes and fourplexes and smaller types of housing that can create a new condominium opportunity for a working family in a neighborhood that, and again, that has green space. And there are solutions in our transportation corridors. I hope I didn't give the impression that we don't need to take advantage of SMART in the 101 corridor and build opportunities near there as well. Northgate is one of the most important opportunities that the city has had for generations, and it's really important that we get it right. So again, just sort of really excited to try to be part of it. And the most important thing, and before I turn it back over to Ricardo, one of the other reasons why I was excited to work with you is, again, seeing in some of the outreach with the Canal Policy Working Group, I think you and staff and the folks in the city deserve credit for trying to build permanent infrastructure, using these plans as ways to build things that stick around, because that's what's going to make a difference in the long term, right? These short-term planning exercises don't mean anything unless we actually build things permanently that matter. And I love the way that I hear, in some ways, again, that this is changing the way the city does outreach on all things, moving forward. And that's the kind of work that I think will really ultimately both change the housing on the ground and ultimately in many ways like change the vibe of Marin County. My wife is not white and we don't live in Marin County. And it's because it's just not a place that feels that welcoming to somebody. And so I live in the places where Lorenzo has to come in order for him to feel welcome. And that comes with complexities. I'm a Marin County white guy who's now a gentrifier in Oakland. I'm bringing I have a different set of challenges in my day-to-day life that comes from, again, the same problems of segregation and lack of housing opportunity. So again, I'm really excited to be part of this and to support you all in this process moving forward. Don't hesitate to reach out. Staff can provide my contact. And I will look forward to seeing you all next month.
Thanks, Alex. Ricardo?
I'll be super brief. So I want to end with what Ali opened up with, and that's we're doing these things because it's the law, but really authentically and genuinely, I feel that the staff that's doing this work is doing it because it's the right thing to do. And they're taking stock of all of the stuff that folks like Alex and Rothstein have written about, all of the redlining, all of the patterns of segregation. It's going to take a while to get to where we want to be, but this is the moment that I think is really opportune for folks to roll up our sleeves and come together. I think we also have to think about, and I'll say it one more time, to align with local developers, with local anchor institutions and employers and small businesses to figure out that we all have to be in this together to make sure that we make it into the future with the kind of success that we've had, because we often are pitted against each other, renter and landowner. But the reality is that we're actually competing with international interests. I don't know if y'all read about this recently, about these huge corporate conglomerate folks just coming in and sweeping up homes left and right. That's who we're actually competing with. If we think of the local developer as the enemy, we're really missing the boat on how we need to keep the power in the economy local. And so not seeing each other as enemies, we're really like, okay, developers, how can you work with us to make sure that we're getting to these outcomes? So I just wanted to plug that. And I'm also happy to continue to work with whoever wants to work on this. with Christine and with Barry and with Allie. So, and I appreciate your time. I know it was really fast. It's very little time. We could keep talking about it, but I welcome another opportunity in the future. Thank you all.
Thanks, Ricardo. Bad timing for my phone to be ringing. So I just wanted to wrap us up here. A couple of remarks about what we're going to do next. We're going to take a slightly different approach, as you have gathered from our conversation just now. Often we go out to the community and say, what do you think? What do you want? I think we're looking at this differently now. We're actually drafting strategies for folks to react to and looking at our policy options at this point. So we're going to be going out basically in the next 2 weeks to develop 2 weeks to 4 weeks to develop some strategies to be vetted with the broader community. We'd like to bring them back to you at our next meeting. So we don't have a date scheduled right now with this group. This is actually the last official scheduled meeting of the working group. We're looking at possibly a June 30th meeting. This is the last Thursday in June. We'll be circling back with all of you, but at that meeting, in advance of that meeting, we'll be providing some draft policy and program language, really just something to react to, something to give us some thoughts on that we would like to take out to the broader community and start testing and seeing if the programs and the program ideas resonate and if we can get some feedback over the summer on those program ideas. So with that, I think we're going to close this item and see if there are any general announcements from any of our members. Any updates or announcements that folks would like to add? Daniel?
I just wanted to comment on an earlier topic that came up, which was that on the CalEnviro screen map, showing sort of the environmental issues in the canal, and therefore that being rationale for not having TOD, when actually the downtown area and the Northgate area is where the transit-oriented development is, and is the third highest and highest quality on the CalEnviro screen. And a further point to that is all affordable housing is held to high green building standards. Pretty much the baseline is LEED Gold or Greenpoint rated gold. So, the cramming people into houses without green, without concerns about the environment is just something that is not true. Basically, any state or local funding you're going to get is going to require that. And then the last of all is, again, I just want to stress that vehicle miles traveled is the greenhouse gas emitter. And building in areas that have access to amenities and getting people out of the cars is how you're going to actually do that. It's not in the buildings themselves. And that's why high density in downtown areas and areas that have amenities is so important. And it's not the greenwashing by LEED. And this comes from somebody who was LEED certified. It's really getting people out of cars. And I just wanted to make sure that I said that piece.
Thanks, Daniel. And I also want to encourage members of the working group to email me thoughts and ideas and reactions anytime, but particularly after the meeting, if you have things you wish you could have said or you wanted to say and didn't get to, send me an email and we'll take those. And thanks for that. Don, did you have a comment?
Actually, a question, not a comment, and that is, when is the working group, or is the working group going to have an opportunity to review the sites list?
Good question. We will have that ready before the next meeting. We do have a sites list. It exists. There's some internal vetting going on, and there's a couple of sites that we are trying to get. We're trying to make sure that we can count them at this point, but we'll be sharing that soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Other announcements? I'm just going to go ahead.
Just real quick, team, June the 3rd, Eden Housing breaks ground on the Healthy Aging Complex, Vivalon Complex. So if you're in the area, 67 units that we will be providing homes for $722 up to $1,500, 50% below. So come out June 3rd, I believe the time is 11 o'clock. So great work that's being done in downtown San Rafael for housing for our residents.
Thank you, Lorenzo. And Ali or Christine, any final comments from the city or announcements?
No announcements. I wanted to say thank you to everybody. I really appreciate the very real showing up today. And I always feel like we get really good insight from this entire group. And this is, another example of that. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ali. Okay, I think we're going to close at this point. Thank you all for your participation and contributions. And we will be sending you something very soon with a date for June.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Bye.